Welcome to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to do a brief discussion on ironing the top surfaces of your 3D prints. Today we're going to do a little deep dive on exactly what ironing flow, speed, and line spacing is going to affect the quality of the print and how exactly we're going to calibrate it. So stay tuned, and this is not clickbait. We will talk about 100mm/second ironing, so stick around till the end of the video, and we will have a segment where we talk about this 100mm/second ironing. Before we jump into it, I'm sure if you're like me, this is not your first video you've looked up on ironing, right? And I want to say that I will provide real live examples. I have plenty of examples to share with you on ironing, and we will also show what you might have searched on the internet as well. So let's talk about that really quick before we get into our examples. We're going to go onto the computer. With a quick Google search, we looked up best 3D printing ironing settings. And what we're going to get here as a result is the best 3D printing ironing settings starts with a speed of 30 to 60 millimeters a second and a flow rate of 15 to 35 percent, with a line spacing of 0.15 in between 0.25. So that's what the internet's saying, right? So we just got to take that with a grain of salt. But you could sit there and you could start printing these out, and you could just be left scratching your head at the end of the day because you might not get the result you're looking for. And I'll give you an example of that because I've tried to do this blindly before and it just doesn't work out. So the best way to do this is to use an ironing flow test. So I'll take you to that right now. This is going to be our top surface test. The one we're looking at today is by Leogan Pro here on printables, and the way this works is pretty simple. And when it's laid out like this, it's just got all these little dots here, and at this top one you have speed in millimeters, so 10 through 100, and here we have it's kind of cut off over here, but it says flow, so 10 through 100 flow. So let's just say we pointed at any one of these, like this one here, you can see we'd be at a 70 speed and I don't remember if it's the same one, but we'll say a 70 speed and 70 flow, or this one over here would be like 90 speed and 60 flow. So you kind of get the idea. So if you were to download this and throw it into Orcheslicer, which is what it is calibrated for, it'll look something like this when you first poured it in. Now, this test, my only little complaint about it is on the website here. There's nothing saying what the default line spacing is for this test, so I did find that out for you guys, and it's going to be a 0.15 line spacing default right there, so for the whole test. So whenever you're looking at these in real life, you'll just have to know that it's a 0.15 line spacing, and then whatever the flow and speed is. So the flow basically is just how much material is coming out of the nozzle while it's moving. The speed is how fast it's moving, and the line spacing is how much space it moves over between each pass. There's also another option for ironing angle, and that is something that you won't have to go into great discussion, but it's really just the angle of that the actual pattern, or the actual ironing pattern, gets laid on there. I usually let it just be -1 because that's going to put it at the default for Orcheslicer, and they usually do it pretty good. Kind of like prediction on what it should be. So I just kind of let them decide for me. But otherwise, these three relations here are going to be our most important. Now, the ironing inset, what that actually does is just how much spacing from the outside perimeter that ironing is going to get applied. So it just depends on your model, on what type of ironing you're doing, on what kind of finish ultimately you're going for. So whenever you preview this, it's going to look something like this. Whenever we scroll all the way in our top corner where 10 and 10 is, our grooves are going to look nice and tight and defined. Where if we go to our bottom corner where it's 100, 100, you'll notice that it's going to be all sorts of crazy looking and not very tight and defined. You can see lots of gaps. So you want to cue this up, print it out, and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so now we're over here at the little workstation, if you want to call that, and we're just going to go over some of these examples. So this is what it's going to look like when it comes off your printer. Now this blue one is printed on my Centauri Carbon. This white one was printed on the Elegoo Neptune Max. Now just for the time being, I know we got a lot going on here, but let's focus in on this blue one and let's just pretend like this is the one that just came off your printer. What I like to do is whatever orientation I printed it, I know where my 10 and 10 spot is, and now you can see I just marked it with a Sharpie right there. And that's going to help me identify where my top left corner is, where my 10 flow and 10 speed is started. Now, what I like to do for this part, I slowly peeled it from the underside, trying not to pop any of these off. And then I put a piece of cardboard on it, removed it with the build plate, flipped it upside down, so this is on the cardboard now, and took the build plate off, and then I just put packaging tape on the backside to keep this all nice and tidy, and I was able to mark which side was my flow, where my top left corner is, and speed and all that stuff. So that was my strategy on getting this removed. You know, do whatever you want to do, but that was what I did so I could look at this closely and examine it, because you'll notice there's a lot going on here, so try not to be overwhelmed when you're looking at this. So when you're examining this, there's going to be different parts to kind of look at and what's going to affect the overall finish. Now, I will say that in my experience, whatever you actually print in real life might come out just a little bit differently than what this is going to show, but at least gives you somewhere to start, because this gives you a very good idea of how many options there are to type in before you send it off to the printer. So, and this is literally within tenths, and you can go within tenths of that and within tenths of that. So it's like, this is just a very small scale of what's possible, but at least gives you a more defined region on where to start. For me, I started looking around on this, and I started off somewhere at like, my goal, before we even go into that, my goal with this was to, I'm using PETG, and I wanted to find a way to add a top surface finish that was not going to take too much time. Okay, I've had experience with ironing in the past, and it does add a decent amount of time. So I figured if I could experiment and try to figure out the best ironing settings for the fastest results, that would be worth it to me. So I kind of started off looking over on this half of the map, because I have already tried to print stuff over on this half blindly. Now I'll show you some examples of those. Like, we're using this little key tag badge for a project I'm working on. I don't really have any skin in the game on it, but I'm just trying to help it out. It's for work, but I'm just helping them out, getting them some little key tag identifiers. But something like this, I think, is a really good example to start with for printing out examples, because something like this has some little details and some tight little kind of corners to get into and stuff. So this is a really good example, like real life example of how the ironing might apply to it. So now I'm going to get us in a little closer on what these look like, so I can get a better shot as I present each one to you, and we can talk about like some of the settings that were applied to them and what they're looking like and stuff. Okay, so when I first started this journey, before I printed out the those little dot charts there to help me, I was just printing out things randomly, like something around 30 for speed and flow, like somewhere in that ballpark, right, give or take. And I was just never really getting what I wanted. You could see a lot of lines in the top layer still, and here in between the letterings, there's a lot of gunk left over where the nozzle was dragging stuff, and it didn't leave any of these details refined that I wanted, right? So I was playing around with those, and I'll give you a few examples of some in that ballpark, and we'll call it examples that are, oh, schnappleberry, okay. Examples that are kind of on this half of the map. So if this is our top left corner. Examples that are somewhere in this, region over here. So this is for me with the PETG. And again, this one turned out okay, but I just wasn't happy with it. There's still a lot of lines you can see, and it took a long time. And again, I gotta stop hitting that tripod. And there are pieces within the lettering that you can see and whatnot. So that's another example. Here's one color a little bit smaller, just trying to see kind of what details we can kind of keep. And this one was okay, but it was still slow. I wasn't happy with the exact details on the lettering. But I'm just going to skip past those. I know you guys want to see the 100 millimeter stuff. So 100 millimeter a second stuff, that is. So I just jumped right to that. That's why I wanted to, that's the realm I wanted to play in. And before I show you like my more favorite one, we'll kind of play around and I'll show you what some of these different results look like at 100 millimeters a second. And so like starting up here, this one was 100 millimeters a second, 30 flow and a 0.15 line spacing. And it got some good color, like good matte finish to it, but there was a lot of areas where like underneath on this blue logo, you can see there's just some parts where it missed to fill in. So the flow just wasn't there. But I was definitely happy with kind of the more refined detail in the lettering that I was starting to see actually at the speed. I was pretty impressed. So moving on, you know, we got like, I moved up to 40 flow, same with everything else. And this one's not multicolored, so it can be a little bit more difficult to make out what's going on here. But this one covered a lot of those details that was missing in the logo here, but I noticed that there's areas where there was extra material dragging around. So this ended up being a little bit past what we ended up wanting. And we did even go up as high as 55 in one of the tests just to see what had happened. And you can see again, it's just the nozzles dragging around, a lot of extra material. And let's go to some of these ones that are closer to what we're going for. So this one is back to 30, but this one I started experimenting around 0.2 line spacing. That's where I started to see things change for me. So on the 0.2 line spacing, I started to notice I was getting that detail I was looking for. This one wasn't quite there with the flow. There's a lot of gaps in this one in some of the areas. But 0.2 is definitely giving me good results. So this one was like 35 flow, 0.2. And again, we're pretty close, but there's just wasn't perfect. So then I tried 32.5, and that ended up being a pretty good sweet spot for me for the time being. I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, it's got a nice finish to it. Everything's in really great detail, and I couldn't be happier. It really doesn't add much time at all. So that was definitely worth it to me. I have a nice, beautiful looking tag, and I'll give you some other examples of multicolored ones with these same settings on them. So here's what some of the multicolored tags look like a little bit closer up. And again, you know, I mean, it's not like 100% perfect, but for me, for the time that it added, wasn't very much. And it really adds a layer on there that makes it one level higher than 3D printed, if you will. It just doesn't immediately look like it was 3D printed. So I'm really happy with this. I want to experiment putting some UV resin over some of these projects. But yeah, so 100 millimeters a second, it does work. Just got to experiment around with it. You know, this might not be the finish you're going for, but you can experiment using that chart and print out little examples and find, you know, what is that finish that you're going for. So I hope this information was helpful. Subscribe, like, if you found any of this information handy dandy to you. And I'll be back with some more videos. So that's a wrap, guys. The settings that ended up working for me was 100 speed, 32.5 flow, and 0.2 line spacing. So post in the comments what ended up working for you on your 3D printing journey, and share with us exactly what those settings were, what kind of filament you were using. Again, thank you guys for watching, and come back and for some more videos. Thanks.